I'm tied down with my hands like this. There's nothing to protect my face, and I have 2x4s landing on my head. Broke my nose. Boom, back to the hospital again. So I got to, and the doctor was a really cool doctor. He says, gosh, he says, you know, you're coming in every day. We got to give you some kind of discount. Well, I was going to UCLA, and I was studying acting both at UCLA and privately. So how the screen test came about is that I was selling real estate on the weekends for my father to help, you know, make some money, because I was living by myself at the beach, and I only sold a couple of houses during this whole summer, but one of them was to Saul David, who was the producer of the Our Man Flint pictures and the Skullduggery and some great movies he produced. And he was kind enough to watch a scene that I did, and he sent me to an agent. And the agent, when I went to the agent said, look, I can't get hardly any of my actors work, so don't expect to get a job for at least a year, and if you do, it's going to be a walk-on part, and the only reason I'm taking you is because Saul David asked me to do it, and out of courtesy, you know, I'm doing it. And I said, well, okay, thanks. The first thing I tried out for was a part of Robin. There was 1,100 young actors that tried out for the role. And I'll never forget, I drove over to 20th Century Fox. I met the casting director, and he said, well, actually, let me send you over to the executive producer. So I went to see the executive producer, which I thought was a common thing that everybody did, and it's not. You know, you usually get weeded out long before that. And I met the executive producer. His name was Bill Dozier, and he said, well, he said, you're kind of big to be playing this part. He said, I said, oh, but sir, I promise you I won't grow anymore. And he laughed, and he says, you know, I like that. And he said, I guess you've been playing parts between 15 and 17. Oh, yes, I have. You know, I mean, not going to disagree with him, tell him I hadn't done anything. So he said, all right, we're going to arrange a screen test. And I did the screen test with Adam West. And there was another young man and Lyle Wagner who also were doing a screen test. And it just like, you know, it's one of these things, instead of being knocked around the business for years, I just, maybe because I just had this wonderful opportunity, you know, and I hadn't been emotionally damaged as so many actors are. So I just went for it, you know. It's like I just threw myself into it completely. And even today when I look back, and it's on the internet, you can see my screen test, it was really good. I mean, because I wasn't, quote, acting. In other words, I just totally, you know, I memorized the lines, and I just was totally into the dialogue and into the character. But that was the character of Dick Grayson. You see, I didn't really understand what I was trying out for. In other words, nobody told me this was about a comic book character named Batman and Robin. They just told me, the agents, oh, there's a part over there at 20th Century Fox, go read for it or go talk to them. So it was really very fortunate that you know, I got the screen test, but after doing and in fact, I'll tell you, which is kind of an interesting thing, I had memorized my lines. I have a photographic memory. I really have a great memory when it comes to dialogue and stuff like that. So I knew my stuff perfectly. And just before the first shot, after an initial rehearsal, I was coming down the stairs and meeting Bruce Wayne. I was Dick Grayson. You know, it just said Bruce and Dick. It didn't, you know, no last names. But and I'd already done it a couple times. It was perfect, nothing wrong. And the director says, you know, he said, this time, he said, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to slide down the banister and jump off at the end, you know, and say your line. Well, I hadn't done much practice sliding down the banister. So, you know, here it is, all right, positions, place, ready, you know, right, roll them, you know, sound, action. So I slide down this banister, and to be honest with you, I mean, that was a slippery banister. I could have fallen off and broken my neck. But I really was so focused on not falling that when I got down to the bottom, I forgot my lines. I have never since, ever, forgotten my lines. I was so upset with myself, Couldn't believe that I'd made such a mistake. And I knew it like I knew the back of my hand, but it just shows that if you have something that disconnects your focus, you know, no matter what it is, you can be disconnected for a brief moment. So, you know, they said, cut, and I went and I did it, and boy, I got it perfect. you know. And when I did the series, I never had a teleprompter, always memorized my lines. I was known for making the shows on the very first take, and yeah, I would get it right. And my dear friend Adam, he enjoyed the teleprompter. So sometimes he couldn't see it quite right or misread it or whatever, and we'd have to make takes over and over. But the long and short of it, it worked out very good for me. And I love doing the screen test. But the other part of the screen test, which I didn't explain to you, is they said, okay, Burt, that's really good, and show us some action stuff, because I was a black belt in karate. I could do things really good, and broke a board with my hand. But they said, now we have one last thing for you to do. We want you to meet our wardrobe guys over at your dressing room. I said, meet them? Okay, I'll go meet them. You know, maybe just say hello. I didn't know what he meant by meeting them. So I'm there, and these two guys saying, here, take off your clothes. I said, well, why am I taking off my clothes? Well, we have this to put on you. Oh, well, I can't put it on by myself? Well, you're going to need help to get into this. I said, well, what is it? You know, and they had all this stuff. And it's like, gosh, what is this? And these tights, I'm telling you, I used to call them my python pants, because they nearly strangle you to death. And, I mean, man was not built for tights, let me tell you. Okay, so, you know, and they get me dressed in this thing. It's the most uncomfortable thing I think I've ever been in my entire life. It's most uncomfortable. And they said, okay, now we want you to go out and do your lines and stuff. And I said, okay. And so I'm walking like, oh, it's so stiff. And the director said, no, you can't do that. You got to look natural. It's got to be. I said, how do you be natural in this contraption? You know what I mean? It's like every step I took, it pulled hair on my leg. I mean, just really not a great costume. But I overlooked it, and I did my stuff. And 6 weeks went by. I heard nothing. I said, gee, that's a long time. Well, I guess I didn't get it. What had happened was, I finally got a call from my agent who said, come in and sign contracts. And I thought that was the agency contracts, because I'd never signed anything. So when I got in there, it said 20th Century Fox on them. I said, well, wait a minute, your agency's not named 20th Century Fox. No, this is the studio contracts. You got the part. I said, I got the part. He said, well, you didn't, you know? I said, no. He said, well, you've had it for 6 weeks. We thought the studio told you that you had the part. And apparently the studio thought my agents, nobody told me, right? Everybody knew except me. So when I finally, after signing, and then I went in to actually see the producers again, they said, you know, Burt, we had 1,100 young guys that we interviewed for this role, 1,100. And the reason we picked you was because, in our mind, you, Burt Ward, is exactly what Robin would be like if he were real. So we don't want you to do any acting, per se. We want you to be yourself and be enthusiastic, and that's all we want. And that's exactly what I did. So I was myself. So the things that the character did, I mean, I just made them mine. And Adam was such a pleasure to work with. And it's so funny, because he and I are exact opposites. I mean, he's big and I'm small, certainly in relation to him. And, you know, he's very debonair and, you know, coffee or tea at 4 in the afternoon and very grand. And I'm like this kid, you know. I've always been very kid-like. So when you put Adam and I together, immediately, we don't have to say anything. People start laughing, because there is this, you know, and I love Adam. I mean, he is just the nicest guy in the world. We got to be great friends, unlike so many other actors on shows. We were great friends. I mean, occasionally, even on the weekends, after working together all day for 14 hours a day, we'd go out and play tennis or something on a weekend. And I remember one time we were out playing tennis, and people came onto the adjoining court, and they said, oh my God, it's Batman and Robin playing tennis. I mean, just funny, crazy things, you know. We had a great time. I really adore Adam, and I just work with him. I mean, we do appearances from time to time. We don't live in the same state. You know, he's got his family, I got my family. But we've always been great friends, and he is so much fun to work with. Well, you see, in Adam's book, you know, he describes the feeling of what it was like to wear the costume, and he compares his success to that of Mickey Mouse, of Winston Churchill, and then the one that really got me was when he said, you know, I really, really understood what it was like to play Batman. You know, when I put the cowl on and I watched Charlton Heston play Moses. And in my book, I said, you know, Moses parted the Red Sea. The closest Adam West ever came to that was parting some redhead's legs. But we love each other, and yet we play with each other, you know, psychologically, and we have a lot of fun. But I do love Adam. Batman was a really dangerous show, and I am not accident prone. I am extremely athletic, and I've never even been in a hospital in my life except for an emergency hospital, and that was due to Batman. But always been very healthy, but it was a really dangerous show. And you know it's dangerous when the first 4 of the first 5 days of filming, you end up going to the emergency hospital every day with some significant injury. Let's start with the first day with the first shot. We're at Bronson Canyon, and this is a scene where the Batmobile comes out of the Batcave. It's an exterior shot, so they shot it up in the Hollywood Hills, Bronson Canyon. And I was there 7:30 in the morning, makeup and wardrobe and all of this. And I think it was probably about 8:30. They called me to the set, and there's the Batmobile, and it's inside this cave, you know? So I get in the Batmobile on my side, which is the right side, and I look over to say hi to Adam, and I notice it's not Adam. So I said, oh, you're not Adam. He says, no. He says, I'm Hubie. I said, oh, well, hi, what happened to Adam? Well, I'm Adam's stuntman. I said, oh, really? So he's not doing the shot? Oh, no, he's not doing the shot. I said, well, why are you doing the shot? He said, because it's dangerous. He says, I'm hired to do things that are dangerous. You know, if I get a couple of broken bones, it's okay. You know, I get more money. He says, but you can't have the star get hurt. I said, oh, great. I said, well, you know, what am I doing in here? If this is so dangerous that they're using a stuntman to play Adam, why are they using me? Don't I have a stuntman? He said, yes, you do. Oh, I said, great. Where is he? I asked. And he said, oh, he's over there having coffee with Adam West. I see. Well, maybe he should come over here. And so I said, wait a minute, because they're getting ready now. It's like, you know, they're putting the steam on, and so it's like the Batmobile is going to have all the steam coming out. I mean, they're getting ready to shoot this shot. I said, excuse me, wait a minute. Could I see the assistant director, please? So the assistant director comes over, second assistant director, Ruben, comes over, and I said, Ruben, you know, I'm here doing the shot, but they've got a stuntman for Adam. He said, yeah, it's a dangerous shot. I said, but why don't I have a stuntman? He says, you do. He's over there having coffee with Adam. What? No, why isn't he doing the shot? Because he doesn't look like you, Burt. I said, wait a minute. Why would you hire a stuntman that doesn't look like me? Well, sorry, we don't know, but he does got a very big nose. He doesn't look like you. I said, okay, all right. So anyway, this guy Hubie says, now look, we're going to come out at 55 miles an hour. We're going straight at the camera. At the last moment, I'm going to make a sharp left turn. You really got to brace yourself. There's going to be a lot of centrifugal force. Oh, okay, all right. You know, like, oh my gosh, you know, I can't believe this. You know, I mean, and there's no getting out of it now. That's it. I mean, you're down to where they're getting ready to roll. So what happens? They shoot the shot. We come out right up at the camera. We make that turn. The stuntman did it perfectly, but unexpectedly, my door flew open. At 55 miles an hour, when you make a sharp turn, my door flew open, knocked the camera over, and the cameraman sitting there, at the camera, knocked lights over, and I was thrown. As I'm thrown out, I reach around, and just a freaky thing, I caught the gear shift knob with my pinky finger and just wrapped it around it, pulled my finger right out of the socket because of this force, okay, and just excruciating pain, okay, and it took them like a half an hour to set up the thing, and I told them that I was hurt. They could see my hand was all swollen. They said, look, Burt, we will get you right over to the emergency hospital. They can reset your finger, not a problem. We'll do it as soon as we finish the shot. I said, what do you mean? I'm not going now? No, we got to go back and shoot the shot. We got a whole crew. We got 80 guys in a crew here. Oh my gosh, all right. Well, it was like 4 more takes and we got it right. So I go to the hospital, I meet this guy. The doctor says, geez, that's got to be painful. Yeah, it's very painful, you know. And the thing is because I had to go back and film, I didn't get dressed in my regular clothes. I just basically took off my cape and vest, and here I'm in a green shirt and tights with my little green booties, you know. And, you know, the doctor's kind of looking at me like, you know, who is this guy? You know, a little strange here. So anyway, that was the first day. The second day, we're shooting outside again. This time, I'm in the Riddler's car. This is the first show with Frank Gorshin and Jill St. John, who played the character of Moll. And the car is supposed to be burning. So what happens? I'm down in the bottom of the car, inside. Frank Gorshin's above me. He's supposed to climb out and jump. And then I climb out afterwards and jump down. Well, he came up. I mean, you know, it's a very claustrophobic thing. Your car is burning all around you. You're underneath somebody. There's no exit except straight up, and that person, you know, is not moving as fast as you'd like them to, right? So anyway, Frank climbs up, jumps out, everything's fine. You know, and I climb up, and as I get to the top, and just to get into position, the car unexpectedly blows up. I'm thrown to the ground. Thank goodness I had the cape on, but still there was a little bit of space between the back of my hair and the cape. Second-degree burns on my neck, all right? And I mean, I hit the ground hard. It's like, you know, and I'm kind of dazed, all right? And they said, geez, Burt, nobody knew the car would blow up. They told me that on the way to the hospital, you know, because I had second-degree burns in my arms because, you know, I have the gloves, but then I have the T-shirt, so there's open skin, second-degree burns on the arms. That was the second day, and it goes on and on and on. The third day was when they had a huge set. They said, Burt, this is a one-time shot. This is where the Riddler shoots you with a dart, and you're knocked out. He runs around. He presses what he thinks is the starter button on the Batmobile, and all these fireworks go off. Whatever you do, Burt, do not move. Do not move. You can't. This is a one-shot thing. We've got the big set at 20th Century. This is a wide shot. You cannot move. Okay, I won't move, I won't move. So I did the thing where I got shot with the dart and I fell down. And then when he pressed the button, the fireworks going off. These fireworks are shooting off and they're coming down and landing and burning through my cape. They burnt right through my cape onto my shoulders and burned right through the gloves onto my arms. I mean, I have second-degree burns on my arms again, okay? Burned right onto my crotch. And let me tell you, that's painful, okay? So back to the hospital again. These are, and this is the first 3 days. The fourth day, I'm supposedly, I've been captured. This is after I was shot with a dart. I'm now captured by the Riddler. I'm on this table in a subway, and Batman figures out where I am, and he's supposed to break through this wall, through a breakaway wall, you know what I mean, with a charge, you know, which is more, it's a magnesium. It's still hot, but it's not, you know, big charge. He's supposed to break away, come in and rescue me, right? Okay. Well, we go to shoot the scene, and as I do say, it's always a bad sign when you smell liquor on the breath of the special effects guy. Okay, these guys that are setting dynamite charges, you do not want to smell liquor on their breath at 8 o'clock in the morning. Bad sign. So, what happened was, they forgot to build a breakaway wall. In other words, we did the scene, the charge went off, there was a little bit of motion on the wall, but nothing. It didn't blow apart. They didn't have all the balsa wood and all the stuff. They had forgotten. They built a real wall. Now you got a crew of 80 guys. You got a tight time schedule. There's no time to rebuild this set for 2 weeks and make breakaway walls. So in their infinite wisdom, the producers decided to use 2 half sticks of dynamite. Real dynamite. They nearly blew the entire soundstage down. I'm tied down with my hands like this. There's nothing to protect my face, and I have 2x4s landing on my head. Broke my nose. Boom. Back to the hospital again. So I got to, and the doctor was a really cool doctor. He says, gosh, he says, you know, you're coming in every day. We got to give you some kind of discount. We had probably 30 or 40 different writers on Batman. Some of them really got into the characters good and really nailed it for my dialogue. I'm just speaking of my dialogue. Some of them just did things in the writing of the character that didn't make sense. In other words, when I said holy this or holy that, it was always in relation to something. In other words, it was appropriate to the situation. One of the holies that I did not want to do, I thought was a little too corny, was something like this. Holy strawberries, Batman! Are we in a jam? See, that one I thought was a little on the corny side. But some of them that were written had nothing to do with the action that we were doing. So I was allowed to make adjustments and stuff like that. But beyond that, I told you about how Adam and I were such good friends. Well, when you work in these gosh awful costumes, these incredible number of hours, and 5 minutes after you put this costume on, you have a film of water between your tights and your legs. I mean, it's just, oh. So we would have fun with the situation, and we would ad-lib, not just the Holy, we'd ad-lib all kinds of things. There was a scene that Adam and I did with Yvonne Craig. This is in the 3rd season, where she was playing Batgirl. And the scene was, she supposedly had come in, we gave her this bat gas and brought her into the bat cave to show her this fabulous bat cave, and now, we couldn't let her know, where the bat cave was located, so we gave her this bat gas, and we're in the Batmobile, Batman is sitting in the driver's seat, and I'm in the right side, and Yvonne Craig as Batgirl is in between. And I had this line that was, gosh, Batman, Batgirl is really pretty. And Adam, as Batman, was saying something like, "Well, Robin, I'm glad that you noticed, you pay attention to things," or something like that. Well, Adam was pretty good at his lines. I mean, once in a while he might make a mistake, but he didn't make a mistake more than maybe once or twice. 14 takes will go through, and a mistake every time. And I'm saying, this is not like Adam. There's something wrong. There's something else going on here. And what Adam was doing, he's so smart about this stuff. See, he knew that he would reach a point where the director would almost have to take anything he said. You understand? In other words, there was we had to move on. And when you're shooting television, you got 6 to 8 pages a day, and that's it. You got to get it done. So anyways, like the 15th take, and the director's saying, "Guys, I'm telling you, you're killing me. I'm never going to get hired again in this industry. Get it right this time, So I found out why Adam had done it, because he was getting ready to say a line that was not part of the script, you see. But he wanted to make sure that they'd be stuck to use it. There's no other way they could get around it. So what happened is camera, speed, action, and I say, "Gosh, Batman, Batgirl is really very beautiful." And Adam says, "Well, Robin," he says, "I'm glad you noticed that. It shows the oncoming thrust of manhood." Oh boy. Well, at the time, everybody was so panicked, they didn't even hear. They didn't even know. They couldn't care less. It was, "Hey, got it, let's move on." A week later, we're called into the office of the executive producers with the censors, Catholic Legion of Decency. Madder than heck that we talk about the thrust of manhood, right? And it was that kind of stuff that we did. Half the time we got caught, maybe less than half the time, but so many things. And what happened was, for kids, they love the hero worship. For adults, they love the nostalgia of the comic book. But for the teenagers and college kids, which at that time, in 1966 through 68, they were an audience that you couldn't even reach, they were glued because they watched our show to watch these double meanings and the suggestive stuff that we did. And I talked to people that said, "Oh, in dorms on Tuesdays and Thursdays night, people would be there 45 minutes early to get a seat." That's how much they were into Batman. I'll give you an idea how big Batman was. At the time, and back in 1966, there was really only 2 networks. There was CBS and NBC. ABC was a syndicated network. It wasn't considered a national broadcast network. Between Batman and Bewitched, we made ABC the 3rd network. That's how big. Let's just talk about the first night of airing. When we came on it was Tuesday night, January 12th, 1966, 7:30 at night. When we came on, there'd been a lot of promotion and stuff. And I watched the show for the first time, which, by the way, when you're shooting something, you really don't get to see it all assembled together. And I certainly wasn't even aware of the pows and zaps and the great graphics. And I really loved it. I was so impressed. But the next day when I went into work, they told me that we had a 55 share. I said, "Well, what does 55 share mean?" They said, based on the Nielsen's, of all the televisions that were turned on in the United States, 55% were watching Batman. And all the other local and the other two networks was only 45%. That's really huge. That is really huge. And we became number 1 and number 2 in the whole country, and we were in 106 countries around the world. Batman became a huge success. What made Batman, I believe, not only unique, but a huge success, is that we did something that no one else had ever done in the history of television. Let me explain what it was. If you watch the shows like police shows, it was, Dragnet or any of these shows, very dramatic, but it was what it was. A medical show like a Ben Casey or any of these, everything was serious about it. Nobody ever did what we did, which was take something that was written funny, play it deadpan serious, and use what we did. As we used to say, we put on our tights to put on the world. We were the only superheroes that wore our underwear on the outside of our clothes. So we did something, so for kids, it was like real hero worship. Wow, I want to be Batman or Robin. And most of the kids really related to Robin because, they look at Batman at 6'3.5", and he's a giant guy, and look at me, and they're saying, well, the kid says to himself, I can't, I'm not Batman, I'm not big like him, but gee, I could ride in a Batmobile like Robin does. I could be, they're not 15 and a half to have a driver's license. So they related to Robin, but the kids loved it. The adults, the nostalgia of the comic book, but the teenagers and college kids, these double meanings. And people, even today when I make appearances, people come up, and it's so funny how our series affected people's lives. The typical family that comes up, mom, dad, and say little Johnny, dad will come up and say, oh, Johnny, this was daddy's favorite superhero growing up, and Johnny looks up at his dad and says, Dad, why are you acting so strange? Now, they don't see their father do the kind, in other words, that father remembers and becomes kid-like for the moment when I meet them. And then the mother says something like, oh, I was in love with Robin. And little Johnny says, Mom, you're really corny. And it's hilarious. But for that moment, when we first meet, it's like they're not parents anymore. They forget it. They become like the child that they were growing up watching Batman. Yes, because we were aware of other programming, of course, and you had Wonder Woman, and you had other shows that were, Shazam and stuff like that. But our executive producer, William Dozier, was a brilliant man, and he had a famous quote where he said, I'd rather be an innovator than an imitator. And that's what he did with Batman, He was also the executive producer on with the Green Hornet. And people ask me from time to time, they say, oh, what was it like fighting Bruce Lee? And, in that one, there was one episode of our show that this is before the Green Hornet came on television, where since you had the same executive producer, he wanted to use the success of Batman to launch the Green Hornet. So Van Williams and Bruce Lee came on. We shot a scene where I was supposed to fight, Bruce Lee, because we didn't know that each of us was good guys, but we're not supposed to either one win because we're both good guys, right? I mean, there's this psychology that goes with it. But people said, oh, were you afraid to fight Bruce Lee and all this stuff? And I said, no. I said, because what people don't know is that Bruce Lee and I lived in the same complex. And we knew each other for months before he got the part and came on our show. In fact, I remember going with his wife, Linda, and Brandon, when he was 6 months old, down to Chinatown, and we'd have Chinese dinner. I used to spar with Bruce Lee, which was much more violent than what we did on TV. So it was a great experience. He was a terrific guy, and but that just gives you a little bit of the inside of what really goes on, because most people only see things from what they can imagine things to be based on what they've watched on television. Yeah, I was a black belt, and and let me tell you something. As good as somebody can be, there's always a lucky punch that could get in. I mean, I almost kicked him in the face one time. It came very close, and it was, I mean, he wasn't expecting. It's like anything else, And in fact, it's very funny because in martial arts, like I have dear friends that are some of the best in the world, and they'll say the most dangerous thing for them to fight is a beginner, because that beginner will throw some unexpected punch or an unexpected kick or something that is so contrary to what you would expect that it can catch them off guard. I love working with all of the actors. I mean, I was like a kid in the candy store. These were everyone I had watched on television or seen in movies, and each one, I mean, to meet them in person and be doing a scene with them, it was really cool, And I was never an actor that was like, thought of themselves as very important or anything. Maybe because it was easy for me to get the role, that, you know, I just took it for what it was. But there were great actors and stuff. I mean, and some of these people, when I was a little kid, 5 and 6 years old, I'd seen on television, like Tallulah Bankhead, who played Black Widow, and it was George Raft, who was the famous, you know, bad guy and stuff like, and yet Cesar Romero, you know, Frank Gorshin, Burgess Meredith, there's, you know, Joan Collins, so many great actors and actresses, and every one was very professional. I learned a lot from them. The only one that I didn't feel, you know, real comfortable working with was Eartha Kitt, that had played Catwoman. I don't know. Maybe she was just having a bad day the days that I saw her, but she just seemed like not a happy person. Whereas everybody who was doing Batman was like, "Oh wow, you know, this is so much fun," and it gave these actors a chance to do some really zany things that they would otherwise never do in their normal acting. In the case of Otto Preminger, you know, he had a reputation of being a really tough guy. You know what I mean? I mean, most actors feared him because he was just like, you know, and I'd heard all this stuff about him, and yet he was very nice to me, you know? And something about doing our show, it took all these wonderful actors, tremendous experience and success in their own lives, and somehow it brought them into this other world that they got to experience for, you know, a week when they filmed the show, and they all seemed to just thrive on this opportunity to not be limited in what they were doing. In other words, they could make their characters bigger than life. Well, Julie Newmar is a delightful person and a fun, wild kind of lady that it was always a pleasure to work with her, and she threw herself into the character. I mean, and she found depth in the character, and I mean, she really thought things through, and it was really wonderful to work with her. Although I must tell you, some of the shows I did with her were some of the most dangerous shows I had ever done. There was this one scene where in one of the shows that she hangs me, I'm tied up, and I'm kind of hanging over a cage with 3 live Bengal tigers, the real kind. Now they can jump supposedly 15 to 18 feet, and I was only 12 feet above them. And it's kind of interesting, if you can imagine looking down and you have this circular cage with 3, and these are not tame, these are wild animals, okay? Bengal tigers. And I'm there, hung over kind of like a teeter-totter board, right? Being, you know, about to slide into them. And 5 feet above me is a steel cage that the camera guys are in to protect them. You know, it's like a shark cage, right? So the director and the camera guy, and they're 5 feet above me in a steel cage, and they're filming this down, and the cats seeing me there are circling, and the director says, wait a minute, we got to get more action out of these cats. I said, well, what do you have in mind? I said, I'm tied down here. I really, you know, please don't do anything dangerous. So he calls over one of the handlers of the cats, and they try to do some tapping to get the cats more looking up at me. And they looked up, but it didn't do what the director, he says, I need more. They hung meat over my head, and these tigers were jumping up at my face while trying to get the meat, okay? And they said to me afterward, Burt, you look terrified. I said, yeah, I was terrified. What do you mean? They're huge claws. They're like, you know, a foot away from my face. It was a very scary show to do. I like working with all of them, honestly. I don't think I had one favorite. I learned something from every one. You know, I mean, Cesar Romero was like the ultimate slick, professional, always on time, knew his lines. I mean, just, if he had to do a scene 20 times, he could do it and it would be just as fresh and innovative the 20th time as it was the first time. I mean, I was very, very impressed. And you know, I was very impressed with Adam. I mean, Adam was like a mentor to me, you know. And it's so funny because he could do things and not get in trouble. That if I did something similar, I'd get in a lot of trouble. You know, like once in a while, we'd jump in the Batmobile and he'd kind of skid off and, you know, maybe graze the set or something coming out of the Batcave, you know, because the very first day we were actually in a cave. I had explained in Bronson Canyon, but when we're on set on stage 16, that's inside a soundstage, but we kind of would drive out of the set as appearing to be going through the canyon. But like one time I was supposed to drive out, and I just stopped a little bit and just dinged this one little thing, and oh boy did I get in trouble. And, and it's like I said to him, I said, how is it that everything you do, everybody loves, and anything I do wrong, I'm a bad kid? And he's, well, yeah, you just got to know when to do it and when not to do it, and you got to know how far to stretch the elastic. Oh yes, was I aware of what he was trying to do, and it actually is a little bit different than you might think it is. First of all, if you notice when he said his lines, Adam spoke very slowly. Why did he do that? Well, he understood that if he spoke slowly and they had to be on him for the entire line, it would take longer for him to say his lines. The camera would be therefore on him longer and less on the other actors. He's very smart about that, okay? Also, he did some things that were kind of borderline, competitive. For example, we had a scene where Adam, Batman and Robin are talking, and the camera's where you are, and Batman's here, and I'm here, and we're talking, and then all of a sudden, he opens up his cape and walks right up to the camera and stands there blocking me out, and the director says, wait a minute, Burt's in the shot, Adam. He said, oh, I had to do it. I said, well, why did you have to do that, Adam? They said, he says, because I felt the moment. I felt it was necessary. Well, you go back and it's not necessary. Don't block Burt and let him be in the shot, because we need to hear what he has to say and we need to see him when he says it. You see what I mean? Very well planned. There's no accidents. Adam doesn't make mistakes, really. He knows exactly what he's doing. Well, and it's funny because we did have some, a lot of times we partied together too with people when we were both single, and Adam's a wild guy, let me tell you. I mean, he and I are both happily married now, but there was a time when we really partied pretty hard. Although I don't drink, smoke, or take drugs, neither does he, but we really had a lot of fun. This is during the 60s. This is a period of time when they had all that free love and stuff like that, and we were pretty wild and crazy guys. Well, I have a very definite belief as to why the show was canceled. Batman was a very expensive show to make. As I understood it, the producers were losing $200,000 to $300,000 a week making the show. That's a lot of money in 1966, 67, and 68. And we had a unit production manager. And the unit production manager, they handle the finances. They're supposed to, arrange for this to be done and get the best price and all this stuff. But he wanted to be a director. And he went to the producers and said, if you let me direct these shows, I promise you, I guarantee you, I will bring them in on budget. And they gave him a chance, and he did just that. But there was a tremendous cost to it. The cost was it didn't have the heart. The jokes weren't funny, and although he laughed at them. And it cheapened the show so much that to the audience, in my opinion, because I would go out and make personal appearances and I'd hear it, say, gee, Burt, gosh, those first 2 years, it was so great, the things and this and the funny lines and the moments and this and that, and it all became cookie cutter stuff that wasn't funny anymore. And I complained about that, okay? Ultimately, because of my complaint, the now director from second unit production manager became very embittered towards me, and for the next 30 years went around saying bad things about me, which actually kept me from some work. But I loved the show. I only wanted the best for the show, okay? And so did Adam. And it was really sad because it wouldn't have had to end then. I mean, it doesn't mean that it would have gone on forever, of course, but it ended early because it was all about money and bringing things in on budget, on time, even if the payoffs weren't as good and it just wasn't the level of quality that we originally started with. First of all, it was the greatest opportunity in the world. I wouldn't have changed a thing. And I have no resentment at all, none. It is interesting that there were some, you win some and you lose some. During the second season, during the hiatus, because the first season we shot the Batman movie, but then the second season there was a hiatus, and I was up for a film at 20th Century Fox. So I thought because it was the same studio, right, that I'd have a much better chance, because if it was another studio, I'm sure the studio wouldn't have let me, work for a competing studio. But this was a small film, and the producer was named Larry Terman, and he wanted me for this role, and I thought I had the role. Everything is all set, and the last minute the studio said, no, I'm sorry, you can't use Burt. And the reason we don't want it, not that he wouldn't be great for the role, but we got a #1 show on television. We don't want to do anything to dilute the imagery of that or the success of that show. We don't want him playing another character, so you're going to have to hire somebody else. And I felt really bad, but it was a small film. And by the way, the name of the film was The Graduate. So when they didn't get me, they got Dustin Hoffman. It became somewhat of a successful film. Okay, but nevertheless, that's something that happened, and so what? I mean, you win some, you lose some. Well, you have to understand, I love the character, and I love playing the role. Hated the costume, but I loved everything else. And it was a lot of fun doing the movie. And I got to work with, Julie and Frank Gorshin and Cesar Romero and Burgess Meredith, the 4 villains as one, and working with Adam, which was always fun to do. And it was bigger budget. It was longer to produce. It wasn't one of these things you make in a week. It was like 4 or 5 weeks, maybe even 6 weeks. I don't recall exactly. But it was a lot of fun. There was a lot more stuntmen and a lot more events and stuff. I had a great time. I mean, again, it was very dangerous. So I was out on this boat. We had this bat boat. And of course, they had that same stunt driver, Hubie Kearns, driving it because it was too dangerous for Adam to drive. They didn't want to lose Adam, but I don't think they mind losing me. In any event, we're driving on the ocean at like 40 miles or 45, miles an hour, and it was very, very fast. Camera boat's in front of us. The camera boat turns, and because there's a wake created by the engines, the propellers, and I'm on the right-hand side, the boat turned on its side, and I went underwater, even though I was strapped in momentarily, and at 40 miles and 45 miles an hour, the force of the water, just nearly suffocated me. And I was ready to kill that stuntman. And it really probably wasn't his fault, but I was ready to kill him anyway because I thought I was a goner, and I got back there and I'm, all upset. Everybody said, "Gee, Burt, are you okay?" And, and by the way, the person that asked me that was my stuntman who was still drinking coffee with Adam West. So it was a very entertaining show, but it was very dangerous. I'll never forget all the real serious stuff. I used to tell people, can you imagine every week working on a wonderful show that you barely managed to survive? We were tortured every way you can imagine, tied to train tracks, in giant birthday cakes. Just every conceivable contraption you can imagine. Giant clam, nearly eaten by a giant clam. Well, Adam did it wonderfully too. It was a cute scene in which we're on the pier at Santa Barbara, and Batman discovers this bomb. Okay, and of course, it's going to go off, so he's got to get rid of it, right? So it's funny. He runs over to this pier, and on one side he starts to throw it, and there's a group of mother duck with her little ducklings out of the water. He can't throw it there. Then he runs in another direction. Here's a Salvation Army band playing, and and everywhere he goes, it's like you can't throw it. You can't, And he had a great line where he says, "Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb." And I'll tell you another one of the great lines that Adam had, and I tell people this, and it just even today makes me laugh. When we were doing the movie, Neil Hamilton, who played Commissioner Gordon, and Stafford Rep, who played Chief O'Hara, there was a scene in the commissioner's office right in the very beginning of the movie where Commissioner Gordon says, "Batman, any one of these villains could wreak havoc on Gotham City, any one of them. But to have the Catwoman, the Riddler, the Joker, and the Penguin all together," he says, "what could they possibly have in mind?" Batman, very stoically, Adam says, "Well," he says, "I think their minimum objective is the entire world." minimum objective, right? I mean, that's the kind of crazy, funny Batman humor. As a kid, I never saw a Batman comic book. I didn't even know about Batman comic books. For whatever reason, I grew up Beverly Hills. I read Superman, I read Superboy, and I'll tell you something, and I really believe that thoughts are things. I wanted so much to be Superboy, because I knew I wasn't Superman. I was just a little kid. I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I had a tricycle. And my mom used to take a bath towel with a clothespin, okay, and wrap around my neck and hold it together with a clothespin, and I'd ride my little tricycle around with my little towel, wanting to be a superhero. As I grew up, I was a sociable person, but I spent a lot of time by myself every day after school. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, and as a result, I used to spend time every day when I come home from school. And I remember having this big area and a big wall where I used to take a ball and kick it for hours against the wall and be daydreaming about being Superboy. And it is interesting that years later, this intensity of projection and of thought, that it would end up that I would have this role. I mean, I did this since I was 3 years old. I mean, you talk about an intensity that ran for probably 15 years, 10 to 15 years of thinking about something and wanting to be it, and intensely. I have an ability to really focus on what I do, and I'm just thinking, and I believe thoughts are things. Somehow it created the opportunity, and then when I had the chance, okay, I went for it. I mean, it was like, it's like if you're playing tennis and the last thing you want to do is hit a weak shot into the net. I mean, if you're going to miss a shot, might as well hit it really hard and go for broke, And that's what I did. I just all the way, right for the character, and they loved it. The relationship that Adam and I had as the characters, people really, it's like life. You could take, in today's world, you could almost build a human body, but you can't make it live. There was taking things that were written down and costumes and live people that managed to create a reality that people connected with. And, the relationship, and it's so unusual. From the first day I met Adam, there was this electricity that the two of us, when we communicated, it just instantly transferred to people. I mean, they just saw it like that, and they liked it. It's funny, because when Batman came out, it was such a success, that everybody wanted to get into the act to analyze, this thing. Oh, I mean, you had the psychologists, and you had, the various religious organizations and people. It didn't have blogs at those times, but they have newsletters and all of this. And, one of the things that brought up was, I'll never forget this, like 10-page typed analysis of the, what they call the strange and unnatural relationship between Batman and Robin. And people would ask me about that. I say, wait a minute, what's so strange about two guys that run around wearing tights and live together? Big deal. The reason I think that Batman has the staying power, because it was the first, and it has this heart, it has this energy, it has its own life that I don't believe has ever been recreated in the other shows. They were duplicates. It's kind of like you could have gold, then you could have something that's gold-plated. But our show, with the dedication that Adam and I put in it, and all the people on the crew, the wonderful crew, the artists, the set designers, the other actors, there was a heart in Batman that it will always be on that celluloid and will never be lost.